My name is Stella Crawford. I'm 27 years old. And before you decide what kind of woman I am, before you picture me as cold, dramatic, or vindictive, understand this. I didn't wake up one day and choose war with my family. They trained me for it. They trained me in tiny, polished moments, in jokes that only ever cut one direction, in little exclusions that could be explained away if you didn't want to see the pattern, in the way they praised my older sister Natalie like she was sunlight and treated me like the lamp that was supposed to keep the whole house lit. I didn't want to see it, not until the night it happened at my cousin Veronica's birthday dinner in a restaurant that looked like it had been designed to make people feel glamorous while they swallowed their lies. Downtown Austin, exposed brick, Edison bulbs hanging like warm little moons, champagne glasses chiming at tables around us, laughter rising and falling like music. Every other group looked genuinely happy. Our table looked like a stage. My parents, Patricia and Robert, sat at one end with those stretched smiles that always showed up when there were witnesses. Veronica sat near the head of the table, trying to be bright, trying to keep the peace on her own birthday like she'd been assigned the job of emotional referee. And Natalie? Natalie was glowing in the attention the way she always did. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect posture, like she'd rehearsed how to look successful even when she wasn't. People think confidence is loud. Natalie's confidence was performance. And underneath it, I'd come to recognize the hunger, the kind that feeds on being noticed, even if someone else has to bleed for it. "Stella, over here, sweetie," my mom called, in that sing-song voice that made my shoulders tighten before my brain could catch up. "Sit next to your sister." Of course. Why not position me as the target before we even ordered appetizers? I slid into the seat beside Natalie and opened the menu like it was armor. I'd made myself a promise in the car before walking in. Smile, nod, pay my share, go home. Keep it simple, keep it civil. That was the plan. But Natalie didn't like plans that didn't revolve around her. She leaned back with the lazy confidence only freeloaders seem to master. Legs crossed, one arm draped over the back of her chair. She glanced at me like I was something she'd already owned for years. Then, loud enough for half the table to hear, she smirked. "Still single, Stell?" Her voice dripped with fake concern like she was asking about my health. "I guess nobody wants to date a control freak." 2 seconds of silence. Then my parents chuckled. My father shook his head like he'd just heard the punchline to a harmless joke. "Natalie, behave," he said, but his smile never wavered. Heat flooded my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from that slow-burning anger I'd spent years learning to swallow. That familiar rage I'd been taught to bury because family doesn't fight in public. Family keeps things pretty, especially when the ugly thing is me. I forced my mouth into a polite smile. "You're absolutely right," I said lightly, tilting my head at her. "Nobody wants to date a control freak." I paused. Not long, just long enough to let the air tighten. "Just like nobody wants to pay your rent." Her smirk faltered. "What?" I leaned in slightly, keeping the pleasant smile like a mask. "Oh, that's right. The money comes from me." For one perfect heartbeat, nobody spoke. The air around our table didn't just go quiet, it crystallized. My mother froze mid-sip of wine. My father's hand stopped halfway to his water glass. Veronica's eyes widened, a soft, warning kind of shock, like she could already see the wreckage coming. Natalie's gaze darted across faces, searching for someone to laugh it off with her. Someone to save her. I pulled my phone from my purse with deliberate calm, like I was setting down a final card in a game nobody realized we were playing. "Actually," I continued, voice steady, "it used to come from me." A few quick taps. My banking app opened with that clean, cheerful interface that never matches the ugliness of what it controls. One swipe, 2 taps. The automatic rent transfer, canceled. Another swipe, another tap. The utilities card, frozen. My finger hovered for half a second over the last setting. Not because I doubted myself, but because some part of me still expected lightning to strike me for choosing myself. Then I pressed it anyway. "Done," I said, and set my phone face down beside my plate. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was beautiful. Natalie's face drained of color so fast it was almost surreal, like her body understood before her brain did. "You're not serious," she whispered. "Oh, I am." "Stella, this isn't funny," she snapped. But there was panic underneath the anger now. The kind of panic that comes when a person realizes the floor they've been standing on isn't theirs. "I'm not laughing." My father cleared his throat, jaw tightening. "Stella, this isn't the time or place." "No," I cut in quietly. "It's exactly the time and place." I looked at him, then at my mother. "You all laughed when she mocked me. You all looked the other way when she took advantage of me. But now that I've stopped paying, suddenly it's inappropriate. Natalie shoved back her chair, the scrape of wood against hardwood sharp as a slap. You're completely overreacting. It was just a joke. So was my financial stability, I said, still calm. Apparently. Her eyes flicked to my mother for backup. My mother stared into her wineglass like the answer might be floating in it, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't defend me. She didn't scold Natalie. She just waited, like she always did, for me to cave so the dinner could continue. My father looked ready to lecture me, but it was like the words had fallen out of his mouth. He'd never built a speech for a daughter who didn't obey. I sat back strangely detached, like I was watching the scene from outside my own body. You've been mocking me for being alone, I said, voice soft but clear. But without me, you wouldn't even have a place to mock me from. Natalie grabbed her designer handbag like it was a weapon. You're insane, she hissed, and stormed toward the restrooms. Under the table, Veronica's hand found mine and squeezed gently. You okay? She whispered. I nodded, surprised to find I meant it. Better than I've been in years. The rest of dinner limped along like a wounded animal. My parents tried desperately to pretend the explosion hadn't happened, asking Veronica about her new marketing job, her upcoming vacation, anything to fill the space. But every few minutes they glanced at me, waiting, expecting me to backtrack, to apologize, to do what I always did, make it easy for them again. I didn't. When dessert arrived, some fancy deconstructed cheesecake with edible flowers, Natalie's seat stayed empty. I wasn't surprised. As I took my first bite, something washed over me I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not triumph. Peace. Quiet. Simple. Real. Across the table, my mother finally sighed, setting down her fork like she was exhausted by my boundaries. You really didn't need to make a scene, Stella. I met her eyes and my voice didn't shake. I didn't make a scene, Mom. I paused, letting the truth land where it belonged. I ended one. My father's jaw clenched. Family takes care of family. Then take care of her, I said softly, placing my fork down with finality. Because I'm done. He didn't respond. He looked away the way he always did when the truth didn't fit the version of family he wanted to believe in. When I finally left the restaurant, the night air felt sharper, cleaner, like the world itself had shifted on its axis. I walked to my car, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, heart steady for the first time in months. I thought about every rent payment, every utility bill, every grocery run where my card somehow ended up paying for Natalie's cart too. Every time she'd laughed at me and I'd swallowed it to keep the peace. And I thought about the moment tonight when her cruel laughter died in her throat, when my voice didn't shake, when I finally chose myself. If you want to understand why that one sentence detonated like a grenade at dinner, you need to know the story behind it. Because this didn't start at Veronica's birthday. It started the day I agreed to help my sister get back on her feet. Translation: the day I became her personal ATM. And what I didn't realize then, what I couldn't afford to realize, was that Natalie wasn't just taking money. She was feeding someone else with it. And my family already knew I'd be the one expected to pay the bill. 2 years ago, I still believed guilt was the same thing as love. That's the embarrassing truth. I didn't think of myself as weak. I had a stable job. I paid my bills on time. I kept my apartment clean enough to make my mother's friends compliment her parenting, which was apparently the highest achievement a daughter could offer. But guilt doesn't care if you're competent. Guilt only cares if you've been trained, and I had. It started the same week Natalie's life imploded. At least that's how she told it, like she was the hero in a tragedy, like the universe had personally targeted her. Her boyfriend had dumped her. She'd quit her job at the boutique because her manager was toxic and controlling. She had nowhere to go. That's what she said. And when Natalie told stories, my parents listened with their whole bodies. Their eyes softened, their shoulders relaxed. Their voices dropped into that gentle tone they never used on me unless I was actively giving them something. When I got home from work that day, I didn't even have time to kick off my shoes before there was a knock at my door. Not a normal knock, a desperate one. I opened it and there she was. Natalie, standing under the dim hallway light like she'd been arranged by a director, hair damp from rain, mascara running in delicate streaks down her cheeks, a grocery bag clutched against her hip with maybe 3 outfits inside and, God help me, a half-dead succulent poking out at the top like a prop meant to make her look fragile. Stella, she whispered, voice trembling. I just need a little help, just for 1 month, until I figure things out. Behind her, rain poured down the stairwell window, turning the world into a blur. She looked small, hurt, abandoned. And I could have said no. I should have said no. But guilt is a language my family speaks fluently, and I'd been bilingual since childhood. So I stepped aside. Come in. Natalie exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She walked past me without hesitation, like my home was already hers, dropped the grocery bag by my entryway, and sank onto my couch with a sigh that was almost theatrical. You're a lifesaver, she murmured, looking around my small one-bedroom like she was inspecting a hotel room. It's so clean in here, like hotel clean. Do you even actually live here, or do you just work and clean? I smiled thinly because I didn't know how else to respond. I live here, I said, and I work so I can afford to keep it this way. Natalie laughed, but her eyes weren't laughing. They were scanning. Coffee maker, wine rack, the framed photos on the wall, the little stack of mail on my counter. I didn't realize it then, but she was mapping my life the way a person maps a store before they shoplift. Within 3 days, she'd made herself completely at home. My couch became her bed. My groceries became her meals. My Netflix account became her all-day entertainment plan. She would stretch out with a blanket like she'd earned it, scrolling through shows while I ate dinner standing at the counter because there wasn't room for both of us at the small table. I'll pay you back once I start working again, she'd say casually. Once. Not if. That word kept me hooked. It implied responsibility. It implied intention. It implied a future where this would stop. It was a lie that tasted like hope. The first month, I helped her find a place. Not because she needed it, because I needed my space back. And I thought if I made it easy for her to leave, she would. I paid the deposit on a small apartment across town. She swore she'd take over payments after she landed her new job. Then that job fell through. Then another one. Then she decided she was too talented to work for anyone and would freelance instead. That's how it started. Just a little help. 1 month. A bridge. And then the calls from my parents began. My mom, sweet as syrup, as if she was asking me to pick up groceries instead of financially supporting a grown woman. Sweetheart, she'd say, she's been through such a rough time. My father, with that calm voice that always meant I was about to be scolded into compliance. You have a stable job, Stella. You can afford to help your sister out. Family looks after family. And then the line that made my stomach twist every time. You're lucky you don't have kids. You wouldn't understand what real stress looks like. As if my stress wasn't real because it didn't come with sticky fingers and school drop-offs. As if being childless meant being spare. Extra. Available. And because I didn't want to be the problem daughter, I started paying. Rent, monthly. Utilities. Then her phone bill, because it was essential for job hunting. Then her internet, because she needed it for freelance work. When I hesitated, my mother would sigh, an exhausted martyr's sigh. She's your sister, don't be petty. Just like that, my bank account became the family's collective safety net. Months blurred together. I barely noticed how often my phone buzzed with payment reminders. How often I transferred money with a tight chest and told myself I was doing the right thing. Until one day I looked closer. Electricity doubled. Internet upgraded to some premium gaming package. Streaming services multiplied like rats in the walls. Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO, Prime. All under my name. All tied to my card. But one line item made me freeze. 3 a.m. VIP table. I stared at the charge like it was written in another language. Then I called her. Natalie answered on the second ring, voice bright, artificially cheerful. Hey, Stell, what's up? What's VIP table? I asked, keeping my tone as flat as I could, because it's on my card. A pause. Just a fraction too long. Oh, she said lightly. That's just my landlord's payment system. The property management company. They process payments through different vendors. You know how it is. My landlord is called VIP table, I repeated, slow. Natalie exhaled like I was exhausting her. Stella, don't be so judgmental. You wouldn't get it. It's complicated. Complicated. That word again. The family's favorite word for don't ask questions. I hung up. Not because I didn't have words. Because none of them were polite enough to say out loud. And still, I didn't cancel the card. I told myself it was easier to keep the peace. Easier to pay it and move on. Easier to be used than to be blamed. That's the thing about guilt. It doesn't ask you to love someone. It just asks you to sacrifice quietly until you forget what boundaries even look like. The emotional jabs came next. Every family gathering turned into a roast, and I was always the punchline. Careful, everyone, Natalie would laugh over brunch. Stella might send you an invoice for that mimosa. My mom would giggle like it was adorable. My dad would shake his head with a knowing smile, like Natalie was the charming one, and I was the uptight one, even while my card paid for half the table. I'd smile tightly. I'd sip my drink. I'd pretend the words didn't sting. But they did. Every time. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, an email arrived that changed the temperature of my blood. Subject, notice, late rent payment. Tenant, mate. Natalie Crawford. It was from her building manager, and it was addressed directly to me. I read it once, then again, then a third time, because my brain couldn't accept what my eyes were seeing. My name was listed as the emergency contact. And not just that, there was language in the email that suggested I was more than a contact. Like I was attached. Like I was responsible. My hands started shaking as I called Natalie. She answered like she was bored. What now? Why am I getting rent notices for you? I asked. It's just a mistake, she said quickly. Too quickly. I already paid. They're slow to update. Really? My voice sharpened despite myself, because my bank shows the transfer went through, and then the money moved right back out to someone named Derek. Silence. Not the normal kind. The kind where a person is calculating. Then Natalie snapped. God, Stella, don't be so classist. I blinked. Natalie, that's not classism, that's theft. You're insane, she hissed, and then she hung up. I stood there in my office kitchen, staring at my phone like it had bitten me. Derek, a name I'd never heard in my family. A name that didn't belong anywhere near my money. And in that moment, something settled in my chest. Not anger yet. Not rage. Something colder. Something that felt like waking up. Because if Natalie was bold enough to route my money out of her rent payments, that meant she wasn't just irresponsible. She was running something. And the worst part, I knew exactly what would happen next. My parents would call. They would defend her. They would tell me I was overreacting. They would tell me I was making it about money. As if money wasn't the only reason Natalie still had a roof. And this time, I wasn't sure I could swallow it. Not with Derek's name sitting in my transaction history like a shadow I couldn't ignore. By Sunday, my parents' house in Plano looked exactly the same. Same trimmed hedges, same pale blue door, same dining table that had hosted decades of quiet compliance. The familiarity should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like walking back into a room where I'd once been locked in. I brought the email with me. Printed, highlighted, folded once, neatly. Not because I wanted a confrontation. Because I was done pretending I didn't need evidence to be believed. Lunch was already on the table when I arrived. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, swimming in butter. Comfort food designed to soften hard conversations. My mother believed meals could smooth anything over if you served them warm enough. My father sat at the head of the table, reading something on his phone, glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up and smiled like nothing was wrong. Stella, he said, you're late. I'm on time, I replied evenly, setting my purse down. You're early. He frowned, but didn't argue. We sat. The clink of silverware filled the space where honesty usually went to die. Halfway through the meal, before anyone could redirect the conversation to weather or traffic, I placed the folded paper in the center of the table. Like evidence. What's this? My father asked, frowning as he picked it up. Proof, I said calmly, that Natalie isn't paying her rent. My mother's fork froze midair. Stella, she said, tone sharpening instantly, why would you bring something like that to lunch? Because you wouldn't listen if I didn't. My father scanned this page, his brow creasing deeper with every line. My mother leaned over to read it too, her lips pressing together as if she could will the words to disappear. This says, my father hesitated, late notice. Yes? And it's addressed to you, my mother added, eyes flicking to me. Why would they email you? That's what I'd like to know. She sighed, not a concerned sigh, an annoyed one. Danielle? Stella. She waved her hand dismissively. You know what I mean. Why would you humiliate your sister like this? I stared at her. Humiliate her? My voice rose despite my effort to keep it calm. She's one missed payment away from eviction, and I'm the one covering it. I'm trying to stop that from happening. The front door opened before she could respond. Natalie swept in like she always did, as if timing was another thing she controlled. She wore the leather jacket I'd bought her last Christmas, the expensive one from Nordstrom. Her sunglasses were perched on her head, hair styled perfectly, confidence wrapped around her like armor. She stopped short when she saw the paper on the table. Then she smiled. Wow, she said lightly. Are we doing courtroom drama now? I clenched my jaw. You've been lying to me, I said. Natalie rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh my God, you're still on that? Stella, you're just bitter because you're single and have nothing better to spend your money on. The table went silent. My father didn't correct her. My mother didn't scold her. They just waited for me to apologize. Something inside me, something small, tired, and so deeply done, finally snapped. You have 2 weeks, I said, looking directly at Natalie. After that, I'm cutting you off. The reaction was immediate. My mother gasped like I'd slapped her. You can't just abandon her. My father frowned deeply. She's trying her best. Natalie laughed, sharp and confident. You'll cave. You always do. I didn't argue. I stood up, picked up my purse, and walked out. That night, my phone became a war zone. My mother's messages came first, soaked in guilt. You're breaking your father's heart. She's your sister. What if something happens to her? My father followed with voicemails, lectures disguised as disappointment. Natalie's voice notes came in waves. I don't need your money anyway. Actually, they're charging me a late fee. Can you spot $200? You're actually evil. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop, and I started cutting cords. Rent accounts, shared cards, subscriptions. I froze my credit, changed every password, canceled every automatic transfer. Each click felt surgical, precise, necessary. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't preparing to save someone. I was preparing to save myself. A week later, Veronica's birthday invitation arrived. I already knew what I'd do. I'd show up. I'd stay calm. I'd let Natalie reveal herself. And if she crossed the line one more time, I'd finish what I'd started. She did. The moment she mocked me at that restaurant, her smug smile, that careless laugh, I knew it was the last time. By the time dessert arrived, I wasn't her safety net anymore. I was her consequence. The following Sunday, my parents invited me back again. Same house, same table, same unspoken expectation that I'd come to my senses. I brought something with me. Another email. Another late notice. I placed it on the table before anyone could stop me. Natalie was late, of course. She's behind again, I said calmly, even though I already transferred the money last month. My mother's smile tightened. Stella, we don't need to air your personal finances at the dinner table. This isn't about my finances, I replied. It's about lies. The front door opened again. Natalie walked in, breezy as ever. Sorry, traffic was a nightmare, she said, until she saw the paper. Her smile faltered. What's that? My father cleared his throat. Your sister says you're behind on rent again. Natalie laughed, light and fake. Oh, that? Clerical error. Stella's being paranoid. Then explain, I said evenly, why my transfer went through and then disappeared into someone named Derek's account. Her smile froze. Wow, she snapped. You actually track all that? That's creepy. Call it whatever you want, I said. I'm done paying for it. You think you're so perfect, she sneered. You're miserable, Stella. Everyone knows it. That one landed. Not because it was true, but because she'd always known exactly where to stab. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough. The room froze. In the silence that followed, my voice didn't waver. You have 2 weeks, I repeated. After that, I'm done. You can't just abandon her, my mother whispered. She's 33 years old, I said steadily. I'm not abandoning her. I'm setting her free. Natalie laughed again, harsh and hollow. You'll cave. I didn't answer. I walked out. This time I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. And that night, as my phone lit up with accusations and pleas, I understood something with absolute clarity. Natalie wasn't just scared of losing my money. She was terrified of what would happen when the truth finally followed the trail it had been leaving all along. And whatever she'd been funneling that money into, it was about to surface. If I'd believed cutting Natalie off would bring silence, I was naive. What it brought was escalation. The first 3 days after I walked out of my parents' house felt unnaturally quiet. No text, no calls, no emergency requests disguised as favors. I woke up each morning bracing for impact that didn't come. And then, on the 4th day, my phone buzzed nonstop. A group text from my mother titled Family Emergency. We all need to rally around Natalie during this difficult time. My father followed immediately. Stella has decided to cut your sister off without warning. This is not how family handles conflict. Then Aunt Linda, who I hadn't heard from in 6 months, chimed in. Why was Stella paying her bills in the first place? I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar knot of anxiety to tighten in my chest. It didn't. For the first time, the silence afterward didn't feel threatening. It felt clarifying. Monday morning, Natalie called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she wanted something without sounding like she needed it. Hey, Stell, I'm trying to set up auto pay for next month's rent, but the card isn't working. Did the bank block it or something? I leaned back in my office chair. No, I said calmly. I did. She laughed, short and sharp. You're kidding. Nope. Silence. Then her voice hardened. You can't do that. I already told my landlord it's handled. I'm sure you did. You think cutting me off makes you some kind of hero? She snapped. You'll regret this when nobody's around to help you. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but you'll regret never learning to help yourself. She hung up. That was day 1. By day 3, she'd shifted tactics. The voice note started, long, rambling, tear-soaked performances. You're not just my sister, you're supposed to be my best friend. I'm having panic attacks because of you. You've always needed to feel superior. Just admit it. I didn't reply. Then came my mother's calls. Honey, your sister had a breakdown last night. She's not built like you. She's sensitive. So am I said flatly. I just stopped paying for it. By Thursday, the pressure turned ugly. A fraud alert lit up my phone. Attempted charge on the utilities card I'd frozen. 10 minutes later, another notification. Credit application denied. My stomach dropped. She'd tried to open a new line of credit using my information. I didn't hesitate. I blocked her number, reported the fraud, closed the shared account completely. The silence afterward felt almost sacred. But peace never lasts long in my family. Friday afternoon, an unknown number called. This is Paul, your sister's property manager, a man said briskly. You're listed as an emergency contact on her lease. I rubbed my temples. I'm not a guarantor. I understand, he said, unfazed. But rent is overdue. If payment isn't received by 5 p.m. today, we'll issue a pay or quit notice. Then do your job, I replied calmly, and remove my contact information from your system. A pause, then a small chuckle. Will do. Have a good day, Ms. Crawford. Click. Another rope cut. That evening, I made tea, sat on my balcony, and watched the sun sink behind the Dallas skyline. For years, my life had been a constant hum of anxiety, always waiting for the next crisis, the next transfer, the next call. And now, nothing. Just quiet. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Mom. I almost ignored it, but I answered. Stella, she said urgently, your sister's having a panic attack. She says she can't breathe. She'll be fine, I said softly. She's not like you. No, I replied, she's not. I hung up. The next morning, Natalie showed up at my apartment door. Her eyes were wild, her hair unbrushed. She held a crumpled eviction notice like a weapon. You did this? She shouted. They want $2,200 by 5 p.m. What am I supposed to do? I didn't raise my voice. Sell the jacket, I said. Sell the watch. Call your club friends. You'll figure it out. I'm not pawning my life, Stella. You've been pawning mine for 2 years. I closed the door. She pounded once more, then stormed off. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. If she gets evicted, that's on your conscience. I typed back. If she gets evicted, that's on her lease. Then I silenced the group chat. That afternoon, another email arrived. Family strategy dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m., attendance mandatory. Mandatory. Of course it was. My father loved structure, loved control. I could already picture the printed agendas. But for the first time, I didn't feel dread. I felt ready. Because boundaries don't mean anything if you only draw them in private. Sometimes you have to defend them in front of the very people who taught you to erase them. And whatever Natalie was hiding, whatever Derek represented, it wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about to be dragged into the light. My father did, in fact, have printed agendas. When I walked into their dining room that Sunday evening, he was already seated at the head of the table, a neat stack of stapled papers laid out in front of him like we were about to negotiate a corporate merger instead of dissect 2 years of emotional and financial damage. My mother hovered near the kitchen doorway, smoothing an already perfect tablecloth. Her face wore that carefully neutral expression she saved for moments when she wanted peace without accountability. Natalie sat slouched in her chair. She looked different. Puffy eyes, hands trembling slightly as she lifted her water glass, mascara still on but applied without its usual precision. Guilt, I realized, could be styled too. This was the version meant to soften hearts. I took my seat without a word. Dad cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. We've developed a simple bridge plan. Of course you have, I thought. He slid one of the agendas toward me. I didn't touch it. Just 90 days, he continued. Stella covers the rent while Natalie transitions. Natalie will handle utilities herself. It's reasonable. My mother nodded gently. Sweetheart, you know she's had a difficult time. For 2 years, I thought. I didn't say it yet. Instead, I reached into my purse and placed my phone on the table. For 2 years, I said quietly, I've been reasonable. I unlocked the screen and turned it toward them. Transaction logs, screenshots, dates, amounts. I'd organized everything. Not out of spite, but because I knew if I spoke without proof, they'd accuse me of exaggeration, of being emotional, of remembering wrong. Here, I said, scrolling, rent transfers, utilities, subscriptions, and these. I tapped one line item. Club fees, online shopping, streaming upgrades, $380 for a VIP table. My father frowned. What's a VIP table? Not survival, I said calmly. That's what it's not. Natalie's voice cracked. Why are you doing this to me? The question hung there, raw and strangely genuine. Because you never stopped, I replied simply. Silence followed, not the tense kind this time. The heavy kind. Veronica, who had been sitting quietly off to the side, finally spoke. Maybe Natalie should sell some of her things, she said carefully. That watch, the gaming setup. Natalie snapped her head toward her. I'm not selling my watch. Then you're not serious, I said. No one argued, because there was nothing left to argue. In the end, Natalie sold the jacket, then the gaming equipment. She borrowed the rest from friends who suddenly weren't as generous without my credit card in the background. She paid her rent, on her own, for the first time in 2 years. She didn't thank me, and for once I didn't need her to. That night, I went home and made tea. I sat by my window and looked around my apartment, the clean counters, the quiet corners, the couch that was finally just a couch again. No notifications, no emergencies, no invisible debt hanging over my head. For the first time in years, my life wasn't a reaction to someone else's chaos. It was simply mine. The next morning, I woke up at 7 a.m. out of habit, expecting the usual knot of anxiety, an overdraft alert, a frantic text. There was nothing. My coffee tasted like coffee, not exhaustion. At work, Cameron, my boyfriend of 8 months, was waiting outside with 2 lattes and that soft smile that always made my shoulders relax. So, he said, handing me one, how's freedom treating you? Lighter, I said, surprised by how true it felt. Weirdly light. He nodded. It's supposed to feel weird. You carried weight that wasn't yours. That afternoon, Veronica texted me. She paid her rent. Barely. Sold some stuff. Borrowed the rest. I stared at the message longer than I expected. Relief wasn't the emotion I'd prepared for, but it came anyway. For once, Natalie had figured something out without me. Weeks passed quietly. My parents reached out cautiously, like people approaching a wild animal they'd underestimated. My mother sent recipes as peace offerings. My father left a short voicemail. You were right about some things. I didn't rush to reply. I wasn't angry anymore, just careful. Natalie went silent. No texts, no calls. The absence felt strange, but I didn't mourn it. Boundaries mean accepting silence, even when you crave closure. And I thought that was the end of it. I thought the hardest part was over. I didn't yet understand that when you take away someone's favorite sponsor, they don't just lose money. They lose leverage. And people who lose leverage often look for new angles, including ones that involve other people's pasts, other people's relationships, including Cameron's, and the ex-girlfriend he hadn't talked about in months. For a while, peace felt real. Not loud, not celebratory, just steady. My mornings belonged to me again. I woke up without bracing for disaster, without mentally calculating how much damage my bank account could absorb that day. I started taking the long way to work. I cooked dinner instead of reheating whatever was fastest. I slept deeper. That was when I should have known something was coming. Because in my family, peace never arrived without someone trying to collect interest on it later. It started subtly, a comment from my mother that felt innocent enough. Cameron seems very supportive, she said during a phone call, her voice light. You're lucky. Some men don't handle strong personalities very well. Strong personalities. Her code for difficult women. I let it slide. Then my father mentioned Cameron too, casually, like it had just occurred to him. He seems nice, he said. Just be careful. Men don't like being dragged into family drama. Dragged. As if I'd chosen this. Still, I didn't push back. I told myself they were adjusting, learning, reaching for neutral ground. I was wrong. The real shift came the day Cameron's ex-girlfriend showed up where she had no reason to be. I was leaving work early, rare, indulgent, when I spotted him across the street, standing stiffly near a coffee shop patio. And across from him sat a woman I'd never met, but somehow recognized instantly. Perfect hair, perfect posture, the kind of smile that knew how to disappear the moment it wasn't useful. She leaned in as she spoke, one manicured hand resting lightly on Cameron's arm. My stomach dropped. I didn't approach them. I didn't text. I went home. When Cameron came over that night, he looked unsettled, like someone who'd walked through a memory they hadn't meant to reopen. She reached out, he said carefully, sitting beside me on the couch. Out of nowhere. Said she heard about everything. Everything. She was worried about me, he continued, about how much pressure I was under. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. From who? My parents? He didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. What else did she say? I asked. He hesitated. That you've always had complicated family dynamics, that you don't know when to let go, that you expect the people close to you to clean up messes you create. I stared at him, not because I believed her, but because I recognized the phrasing. My mother's, my sister's, words that had been used on me for years, now dressed up in concern and handed to someone who mattered to me. And you believed her? I asked quietly. No, he said quickly, but it rattled me. She knew things, Stella, things I never told her. My chest tightened, because suddenly Derek made sense. Not as a mystery man, but as a conduit. Natalie hadn't just been funneling money. She'd been trading information. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Veronica confirmed it. Natalie's been talking, she texted, saying you're unstable, that Cameron should be careful. She's scared of losing you completely. Scared. That word again. Natalie wasn't trying to get her money back. She was trying to get her leverage back. And if she couldn't control my finances anymore, she'd try to control the narrative. By the end of that week, the whispers reached my parents. My mother called, voice tight with concern. Sweetheart, I've been hearing things. I closed my eyes. From Natalie? She's just worried about you, my mother insisted. She says you've been isolating, that you push people away when they don't do what you want. I took a breath. Mom, I said evenly, are you asking me if that's true? A pause. No, she said. I'm asking you to make this easier for everyone. There it was. Not truth. Comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I already have, I replied, just not for the people who benefited from me being quiet. That night, Cameron and I talked for hours. Not fighting, clarifying. He told me about the patterns he saw now, the way Natalie framed herself as fragile, the way my parents spoke about me like I was a liability to be managed. I don't think you're controlling, he said finally. I think you were cornered. I felt something loosen in my chest. Still, I knew something important. Boundaries don't just get tested once. They get tested again, usually through the people you love most. And Natalie wasn't finished, because silence from her didn't mean reflection. It meant strategy. And soon, she was going to realize that money wasn't the only thing she'd lost. She'd lost access to me, to my life, to my version of the story. And that realization, it was going to push her towards something that looked like an apology, but wasn't. 2 months passed before I saw Natalie again. Long enough for the seasons to shift, long enough for the initial shock of boundaries to wear off and settle into something heavier, consequences. Long enough for silence to stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like reality. Veronica invited me to her new apartment on a quiet Friday night. Nothing formal, just wine, takeout, and a few people who felt safe. I almost didn't go. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd finally learned not to walk into rooms unprepared. But I trusted Veronica. When I stepped inside, the first person I saw was Natalie. She looked smaller. Not physically, energetically, no designer jacket, no glossy confidence. Her hair was pulled back without care. Her clothes were simple, functional. She wasn't performing. She looked up, saw me, and didn't look away. Hey, she said softly. Hey. That was it. No drama, no audience. Just two sisters acknowledging the space between them. The evening stayed light. Conversation floated around neutral things. Work, Veronica's new place, a bad dating story that made everyone laugh. I noticed Natalie listening more than she spoke, watching, learning. Later, when most of the guests had left, I stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. Natalie followed. The city lights below us hummed quietly, like they weren't invested in our history. I sold the watch, she said, staring at the railing. And the bag. I picked up warehouse shifts at Target. It's humbling. I'm glad, I said, and meant it. She swallowed. I used to tell myself you helped because you liked controlling people, but I get it now. I turned toward her. You just didn't know how to stop. That landed, because it was true, for both of us. I'm sorry, she said. No tears, no theatrics, just words. I didn't think you'd ever actually let go. I didn't either, I admitted. We stood there in silence, not hugging, not reconciling in some cinematic way, just letting the truth exist without trying to smooth it over. That was the moment I understood something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean access. It means clarity. Weeks passed. Life filled in the spaces where chaos used to live. Thursday pottery classes. Sunday morning runs with Cameron around White Rock Lake. Late dinners with Veronica that didn't end in emotional hangovers. One evening, I was scrolling through old photos and found one from 2 years ago. Natalie and me at a coffee shop in Deep Ellum. She was smiling wide, carefree. I looked exhausted, eyes red, shoulders tense. I remembered that day. She'd asked for one last loan. I'd said yes. I stared at the photo for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of peace. A month later, Natalie posted a photo on Instagram. A small, bare apartment, mismatched furniture, a mattress on the floor, one plant on the windowsill, the same succulent she'd brought to my door 2 years ago. Still alive. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel pity. I felt free. Because real love isn't rescuing someone over and over until you drown together. It's letting them face their own darkness so they can find their own light. That night, I sent her a short text. Proud of you. Hours later, she replied, thanks for everything, even the hard part. Sometime after midnight, lying in bed, the quiet settling into every corner of my apartment, I realized something I'd never let myself believe before. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're the most honest form of love there is. Love without boundaries isn't compassion. It's debt dressed up as devotion. For years, I'd mistaken silence for peace and sacrifice for loyalty. Now I knew better. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to win. You just quietly pull the plug and let the lights go out on a situation that was never sustainable. The following Sunday, I went to brunch with Cameron and Veronica at our favorite spot in Bishop Arts. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Jazz played softly. My avocado toast sat untouched for a moment as Veronica raised her mimosa. To Stella, she said, smiling, for choosing herself. Cameron lifted his coffee. To boundaries. I raised my orange juice. To freedom. We clinked glasses. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Sunday dinner next week. Would love to see you. I looked at it, then typed back. I'll let you know. Busy week. And for the first time, that answer didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like ownership. Because I didn't owe anyone immediate access to my time, my money, or my peace, just because we shared DNA. I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life. You can love your family from a distance. You can care without carrying. You can be kind without being consumed. As we walked out into the warm Texas sunlight, Cameron took my hand. You seem different, he said. Lighter, I replied, smiling up at the sky. Because for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't walking through the world weighted down by someone else's choices. I was just walking. Free. Whole. Finally.